A German shepherd bursts through the blizzard, barking into the void, while the storm roars like a beast trying to swallow everything alive. In that instant, a chilling question strikes. What would you do if your only hope of survival was your dog leading you through a deadly mountain storm? Parents clutching their children, the dog clawing desperately at the snow, a blinding helicopter light cutting through the darkness. This is the unbelievable true story of a family, a storm, and a dog's unshakable loyalty. The snow fell softly at first, like a quiet whisper across the mountaintop. It seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful, like the calm before something no one wanted to face. Inside the small wooden cabin, a family of 4 sat around the fireplace. The flames flickered, giving the room a warm glow, but outside, the world was already beginning to vanish under heavy white. There was David, the father, tall, rugged, with lines on his face carved by years of hard work. He wasn't a man who scared easily, but tonight his eyes kept darting to the window. Beside him sat Sarah, the mother, who held her daughter close. The kids were Emma, 10 years old, curious and brave, always asking questions, and Liam, just 7, shy but with the kind of innocence that made you want to protect him from everything bad. And then there was Max. The German shepherd lay by the door, his ears perked, his body tense even though he appeared calm. His fur caught the light of the fire, glowing gold and black. Max wasn't just a pet. He was family. He was protector. Is the storm going to be bad? Emma asked, her small voice breaking the silence. David hesitated, then nodded. It's going to be rough. We'll need to stay together. Sarah pulled the kids closer, her arms wrapped around them like a shield. Don't worry. We've been through storms before. This one will pass too. But the truth was different. Supplies were running low. The radio had gone silent hours ago. The power had flickered out, leaving only the crackle of firewood to break the silence. The cabin had always been their little escape from the busy world, a place to breathe, to hike, to watch the stars. But now it felt like a trap. Snow piled higher and higher outside. The trees bent under the weight of it. Max stood suddenly, his nose pressing against the door, his body rigid. What is it, boy? Liam whispered, his eyes wide. The dog let out a low, deep growl, not a bark, just a sound that said he sensed something shifting, something coming closer. David moved to the door and peered out through the crack. The world outside was already unrecognizable. The path they had hiked yesterday had vanished under a sea of white. The storm wasn't just arriving, it was swallowing them whole. David, Sarah's voice trembled for the first time. If the storm keeps up, we won't last long. The food. I know, he cut in quickly. I know. Emma leaned forward. But Max will keep us safe, right? Her words were full of hope, but they landed like a heavy stone in the room. Because safety didn't just depend on Max, it depended on survival, on warmth, on food, on making it through a storm no one had planned for. Max padded over to Emma, pressing his nose into her hand. He didn't need words. His presence was enough. He was saying what no one else could. I'll fight for you. The night deepened. Snow battered the roof so hard the whole cabin shook. Then, crack! A tree branch snapped and crashed against the side of the cabin, rattling the windows. The kids jumped. Sarah gasped, her arms tightening around them. Max lunged to the door again, barking loud and sharp this time, his voice cutting through the roar of the storm. David's face went pale. It's worse than I thought. This isn't just a storm. It's a blizzard. Hours dragged like days. The family tried to sleep, but the storm would not let them. Every sound was sharper, every gust of wind stronger. The firewood stack was shrinking, and the cold was creeping in. Liam whispered, Daddy, what if we can't get out? David looked at him, wanting to lie, to say something comforting, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he said, That's why we stick together. That's why we trust Max. The dog barked once, almost like he understood, and then curled up near the door, guarding them. Morning came, but it brought no light. The sky was a gray sheet, the storm unbroken. Snow was piled so high against the door that David had to push hard just to open it an inch. The cabin was buried. The path was gone. The truck? Invisible. They weren't just in danger, they were trapped. Sarah's lips pressed tight as she looked at the kids. She didn't want them to see her fear, but it was written all over her face. Emma clutched Max's collar. He'll find a way out. Won't you, boy? Max wagged his tail once, but his eyes stayed sharp, focused. He knew what they didn't yet understand. The wind howled again, shaking the cabin walls louder than before. Snow pressed against the windows so thickly it was as if the world outside had vanished completely. David dropped the small bundle of firewood left in his hands. His voice was grim. "We're out of time." The room fell silent. Even the fire seemed to shrink back. Sarah's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" He looked at his wife, then at the kids, then at Max. "The storm has trapped us in." Max barked once, loud, echoing in the small cabin like a drumbeat of truth. The family realizes the blizzard has sealed them inside the cabin. Supplies running low, no way out, no rescue in sight. Only Max, their loyal dog, may hold the key to survival. Act 2. The wind, rattling against the cabin windows, as if some unseen hand were testing the locks. Then came the snow, at first gentle, almost beautiful. But by nightfall, it was a white wall pressing against the wooden walls of the cabin. Inside, the Carter family huddled together. David, the father, kept his flashlight in hand. His wife, Sarah, tried to calm the kids, Emma and Jack, while stirring a pot of soup that looked far too thin to last them more than a day. And Max, the German shepherd, paced the floor, ears twitching, nose lifting toward the window. The first night in the storm was tense but bearable. They lit candles, told stories, tried to pretend it was an adventure. But by the second night, the atmosphere had shifted. Their cell phones had no signal, not even a single bar. And the little radio David kept for emergencies spat only static. David crossed the room and pulled back the curtain just an inch. He expected nothing, just endless snow. But what he saw made his stomach tighten, a shadow, moving, too tall, too deliberate to be an animal. David dropped the curtain. "Stay back from the windows," he ordered quickly. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. Sarah's hand tightened around Emma's. "What did you see?" Before he could answer, Max lunged at the door, barking loud and sharp. His teeth flashed in the candlelight. The sound echoed through the cabin like a warning siren. The hours dragged on. Every sound outside seemed louder, closer. The groaning of trees, the whistling wind, the crunch of something or someone moving through the snow. The family barely slept. Max did not rest at all. He stayed by the door, growling every so often as if daring whatever was out there to try and come inside. By morning, the snow had sealed them in. The door opened only a crack before slamming against a heavy drift. The windows showed nothing but blinding white. Jack pressed his hands to the glass. "Dad, we're trapped." David nodded grimly. He knew it. And yet deep in his chest, a worse truth gnawed at him. They weren't trapped alone. That afternoon, Sarah tried to stretch their remaining food into another meal, but it was hardly more than warm water with a few scraps of vegetables. Emma started crying quietly, too weak to hide her hunger. David pulled her into his arms. "Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll make it. Max won't let anything happen to us." Everyone jumped. David raced after him, nearly tripping over the rug. He reached a back window just in time to see another shadow vanish into the snowstorm. "Someone's out there," David said, voice low, urgent. "Watching us." The next night was worse. The storm howled louder, shaking the cabin walls. The kids clung to their mother. David kept the fireplace alive with the last of their wood. And Max was restless, moving from door to window, his eyes always searching. Around midnight, a sharp crack split the night. Not thunder, not a tree, a gunshot. The sound carried through the storm, muffled but unmistakable. Emma screamed. Jack buried his face against Sarah. David's face turned pale. "They're not just watching us." He looked at Max, who was growling so fiercely his whole body trembled. "They're hunting." Panic set in. David tried to reassure his family, but even he was shaking now. Sarah whispered, "Who would be out here? In a storm like this?" David swallowed. "People desperate enough to take what we have." Jack's voice cracked. "But we don't have anything left." No one answered. And then it came. A knock. Not gentle, not polite. A single heavy pound against the door. Max exploded with barking, hurling himself against the wood, as if he could break through it. David shouted for the family to stay back, raising his piece of firewood like a weapon. Another knock. Louder, longer. Then silence. Only the storm remained. The family sat frozen, hearts pounding, ears straining for the next sound. Minutes passed. Nothing. Finally, Sarah whispered, "Maybe they're gone." But Max didn't move from the door. He stayed there, teeth bared, eyes fixed. He knew. They weren't gone. The children began to cry, begging him not to leave, but David's mind was made up. That night, he packed what little they had: flashlight, matches, a blanket, and before dawn, he pulled on his boots and called Max to his side. "Take care of them," Sarah whispered, tears in her eyes. Max pressed his nose against her hand as if promising he would, and then they stepped out into the storm. For hours they trudged, searching for a road, a trail, anything, but all they found were endless trees wrapped in white silence, until Max stopped. His ears flicked, his tail rose. He growled. David froze. "What is it, boy?" Through the swirling snow a figure emerged, a man, tall, bundled in heavy clothes, his face hidden by a scarf. He carried an axe. David's heart slammed against his ribs. "Hello," he called, though his voice cracked. The man didn't answer. He only stared. Then, slowly, he began walking toward them. Max snarled, teeth bared. David tightened his grip on the flashlight, holding it like a weapon. "Stay back!" The man stopped, tilted his head, and then, without a word, turned and disappeared into the storm. David and Max hurried back, fear pushing them faster than the cold. When they reached the cabin, Sarah ran to meet them, tears in her eyes. But before David could speak, before he could even breathe, Max stiffened again. He barked ferocious toward the woods. David turned. The Carter family wasn't alone. They were surrounded. The family realizes they are trapped in the storm and hunted by strangers closing in on the cabin. Max stands guard, but danger is now inches away. By morning, the cabin felt like it was on the edge of collapse. Snow pressed against the walls, windows rattled. Inside, the family huddled together, exhausted, hungry, and frightened. But Max stood tall, his dark eyes scanning every shadow, his ears twitching at every noise outside. The front door had nearly buckled under the weight of snow and fallen branches. It wouldn't hold much longer. Sarah looked at her husband with wide, desperate eyes. "We can't stay in here. If that roof gives in, we're finished." The children were shivering, their little faces pale. Sarah wrapped them tighter in blankets. "We'll never make it far in this," she said, her voice breaking. Max suddenly barked, sharp, commanding, as if answering her fear. He pawed at the door, then turned, his eyes locking with Sarah's. It wasn't just a bark, it was a message. "Trust me." They wrapped scarves around their faces, grabbed what little food they had left, and pushed the door open. The storm roared in, icy wind slicing at their skin. Step by step, they stumbled after him. The snow swallowed their boots, but Max pushed on, never slowing, never hesitating. His fur was coated in ice, his breath coming in sharp bursts, but he moved like a soldier on a mission. Minutes felt like hours. Emily cried that she was too cold, but Max circled back, pressing against her legs. Michael fell, his small hands buried in the snow, but Max grabbed the boy's jacket in his teeth and pulled him up. He was more than a dog now. He was their lifeline. Then a bark cut through the quiet. Max, still standing, half buried in snow but alive. He dug furiously, pulling at the drifts, clearing space around the family. His paws were raw, his body trembling, but he refused to stop. They were weak, every step torture, but Max led the way again. When Sarah stumbled, he nudged her forward. When Michael sobbed that he couldn't walk, Max let the boy hold onto his fur and dragged him onward. By the time they reached the outpost, the sun was setting. A ranger burst from the door, eyes wide at the sight of them. "Oh my God, how did you survive that storm?" The ranger helped the family inside, wrapping them in blankets, giving them hot soup. But Mark knelt beside Max, stroking his frozen fur. Tears filled his eyes. "You saved us, boy. You never gave up, not once." Max's tail thumped weakly against the floor, his eyes closing in peace. He had done his duty. He had proved the ultimate truth. Loyalty was not just a word, it was life itself. That night, safe in the outpost, the family slept for the first time in days. But the story of Max, the dog who had fought the storm, the avalanche, and death itself, was only just beginning, for his courage would never be forgotten.